So, welcome to this live session where I'm going to be talking about this question: are suppressed emotions driving your symptoms? We'll be exploring that. We'll be exploring what are the signs that someone is suppressing their emotions? How can we connect to our emotions, and does connecting to our emotions support recovery if you have ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, long COVID, and related conditions? So if you are watching live, do feel free to say hello. Let me know where you are in the world. If you're watching the replay, again, let me know where you are in the world and put hashtag replay just so I know. So at the end of this video, I will tell you about what next steps you can take if you want to know more about this topic. I've got other free videos that you can access. So consider that the signs I'm going to be talking about are not definitive proof of emotional suppression, but they can be indicative. So you have to use your judgment. Also, feel free to let me know if you've got any suggestions for signs that I might not have talked about. So why do we need to talk about this? Why do we need to consider suppressed emotions? The reason is that there is evidence that suppressing our emotions can have an impact on your health and your energy. I suspect you've had the experience of that. If you've got examples of that, let me know in the chat. But some examples, for instance, you've probably had the experience of feeling upset, feeling like you want to cry, and you get a tight throat. I have a friend who told me that when they challenged one of their parents about their parents' behaviour, their parent would often get migraines. On one occasion, they got bloodshot eyes. It was as if their inner thermostat had gone haywire, and the pressure was building up in the system. I used to avoid conflict, and there's a number of reasons for that, and I've talked about that in other videos, why we kind of don't allow ourselves to express our emotions. But for me, it was about the idea that I didn't really trust my emotions. I didn't value my emotions. I kind of judged my emotions and feared that other people would judge me if I showed emotion. I'm not so worried about that now, okay? And I've had to learn how to not suppress my emotions, because what I learned is that when I do that, there were times when I have been angry and I've suppressed my emotions, and it's resulted in tension in my body. That's resulted in fatigue. I remember one time feeling a bit overwhelmed with someone close to me, and even a friend mentioning how's things with that person. I instantly felt overwhelmed and my energy drained out of my body, and my friend noticed that. And that was because I was suppressing all these feelings of overwhelm. Okay, so what are emotions? Let me know in the chat. What are your thoughts about how would you define an emotion? I would say emotions are the authentic response of the body to a situation, as opposed to feelings that are generated as a result of some thinking. So if someone, let's say, someone says something nasty to me, I might feel sad, I might feel angry. These are the emotions that are coming from my body. I might go to my head and think, oh, I must have done something wrong, and now I'm saying to myself, I'm bad because I made a mistake, and now I'm feeling stressed, maybe anxious, and that's the result of some thinking. Okay, so I'd like you to consider that many of us have learned to suppress our authentic emotions because when excuse me, because when we were young, we had a choice between being authentic and being attached. And for some of us, we had to compromise our authenticity in order to feel safety in connection. We had the fear that if we expressed our true selves, that we would be rejected. Okay, attachment is one of our core needs. Okay, let's say as a child you got told off. This might have caused you to experience some distress, some upset, some difficult emotions that you weren't equipped to deal with. And so one strategy is to come out of our body, disconnect to what's going on in our body, and connecting to our mind. So we create a belief, oh, I've done something wrong, I've been told off, therefore I must be bad, wrong, unlovable. Okay? So we create these beliefs that distracts us from the discomfort of the emotions, but we're also still experiencing some dis-ease because now we have a belief about ourselves which creates a level of stress in our body. Okay? So what are the signs of suppressed emotions? Let me know which ones you can relate to. Okay? So the first consequence is that we tend to think rather than feel. You probably know some people, if this doesn't describe you, who are very cerebral. They're very in their head. They're very intellectual and very logical. Sometimes, not always, but they may lack empathy. Okay, so these are signs that someone is in that mode of thinking rather than feeling. And I remember working with a client who told me, in our family, rationality, logic was valued and emotion was not valued. Emotion was viewed on as being illogical. Okay, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that that's not the case, that our emotions are a useful tool when we know how to use them. The second thing is that the second sign is difficulty in identifying emotions. Some people don't have the vocabulary for expressing feelings. You'll ask them, how do you feel? And they'll say that I feel that this person is not listening. Actually, that's a thought. That's a belief, okay? Whereas a feeling is a word. Let me just share my slides and I'll go to the slide. So this is a list of feelings according to some psychologists. These are, a list of emotions, okay? And I'd like to consider which of those emotions do you feel that you have some connection to. If you recognize that there are things on that list that maybe you tend to gravitate towards. For instance, at one point I realized I was very much all about happiness and joy, and I avoided sadness, I avoided anger. I probably did experience some shame. I was brought up Catholic, and so that was my experience. So consider there might be things on that list that you gravitate towards more than others. If you think of the artist's palette, then the artist, in order to create a colourful painting, needs to use all those colours, the bright colours, the reds, the yellows, the greens, the blues, but also the browns and the greys and the black or whatever. So, and in the same way, I recognised when I had an experience which caused me a lot of sadness that I'd avoided sadness for quite a long time. Okay, so practicing just connecting to what we are experiencing on an emotional level can help us build our vocabulary. So this is a list of emotions. The list of feelings is much longer. Okay, so remember that feelings are the result of some thinking. They're to do with perception. If I say to someone, I feel manipulated, that's actually a perception. It's my interpretation of the situation. If I say, I feel angry by what you've said, then that's me getting in touch with an emotion. Okay? So that's the second thing, difficulty in identifying emotions. The third sign is around avoidance, avoiding uncomfortable emotions. Some people actually fear their emotions. They fear that actually if I get angry, then I'll be out of control because there's so much anger within me. Okay. So, and I can relate to that at one point that I did feel like I feared my emotions. Okay. Let me know in the chat. Does that resonate? Another sign to do with avoidance is that we avoid conflict. So let me know again in the chat, is that something that you're comfortable with, conflict situations, or do you tend to avoid it? What was very interesting is when I was training a group of people in Norway, a lot of people in the group were saying, I don't have any trouble with conflict. My issue is that I tend to upset people because I'm very blunt. And that was very different to when I trained people from Britain who were much more concerned about not upsetting people. Okay. And they would avoid conflict for that reason. Another type of avoidance is avoiding eye contact. I had a friend who found it really difficult when I looked her in the eye. She preferred not to kind of have direct eye-to-eye contact. Other avoidance strategies are to distract ourselves if we feel upset. For example, binging on Netflix, social media. Some people do get into doing lots of research, for example, on how to heal ME/CFS. And that can be good, but that can also be, there's a balance to be struck. That can be a distraction. Obviously, there's other ways people can distract themselves. Comfort eating, binging on chocolate, biscuits, alcohol, etc. Okay, so distraction is one strategy. Another strategy is to chastise ourselves. Again, this is a sign that we're in our head. Okay, telling yourself that you're bad, you're wrong because you made a mistake is different to just feeling whatever sensation you're experiencing. It might be you've overdone it and now you're feeling physical sensations. Can be challenging. I know that from my own experience of just allowing myself to be with those sensations of physical discomfort. Okay, so we can chastise ourselves, we can catastrophize people, when they overdo it. I've worked with many people who say, actually, I do catastrophize. I tell myself I'm never going to get well. And that just generates more stress in their body and it hinders the body's attempts to heal. So that's the third thing, avoidance. The fourth sign is to do with physical symptoms. When we avoid emotions, this can result in physical symptoms, headaches, stomach aches, muscle tension. What are your signs in your body that might indicate that there is some suppression of emotion going on? For me, at one point, I often got tension in my stomach. I remember one time when I was feeling very nervous, I was acting as a support to a counselling course at which I'd done, and I was asked whether I wanted to come along as a support person, and we had to run these little groups. The first time I did it, I was so tense that I got cramp in my calf and had to stand up. Okay, and these symptoms can arise from the stress of keeping emotions bottled up, can result in tension, rigidity in the body. Peter Levine, who does a lot of work with trauma, says that when we suppress our emotions, we actually do it with our muscles. Okay, that's a way of locking in the emotion. And as I said earlier, that's something I recognize that I did. I suppressed my emotions and I would get a lot of tension in my neck, back and shoulders when I felt I was in a situation which was calling on me to express my emotions. I know someone who, a lot of people felt that this person was very kind of passive aggressive, and they were always wearing a neck brace. And I couldn't help feeling that, maybe if they express some of that emotion, then maybe some of the tension would be released from their body. I've chatted to body workers who say that when they work with people, when they do manipulation of the muscles, often strong emotions come up, and the person recognizes that they've been suppressing emotions. So the fifth sign is to do with the states that people can inhabit. For example, being in a depressed state. And if you think about the word depressed, we're pressing down our feelings. Some people say that depression is about pressing down our anger. Okay. Another state is being a worrier. So I'm training with Claire Caldwell. Some of you may know her, and she gave this very nice analogy or very pertinent analogy. If you think of a pot, and every time you suppress your emotions, you put some emotion in that pot. You put more emotions, that builds up, And she says the lid of that pot is anxiety. So the anxiety is a result of built up emotions. And therefore, if we can, it's like a pressure cooker effect. If we can start to release some of those emotions, then that releases the pressure, releases the anxiety. The pot starts to become less full. Another state that people can get into is hypervigilance. So people who are always on alert, okay? And again, that can be the sign that we're kind of suppressing quite a lot of emotion. Again, that lid of the pot is the anxiety, but that's the byproduct of storing these emotions. So anger can be another sign. Now, some people might say, well, it's surely being in touch with your anger is a sign that you're in touch with your emotions. That's true. It can also be the case that our anger may be a distraction from some deeper feelings, for example, feelings of hurt. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment and just feel free to let me know in the chat that what's resonated. What are the things that you can recognize from what I've said so far? I'm also curious just to know that the chat's working because I haven't seen any messages so far. So do let me know if you wish. Okay. So I'll keep going. So the sixth sign is to do with behaviors. So people pleasing, excessive politeness, or being a helper, rescuer. These can be signs. Certainly people pleasing was a trait that I recognize in myself. Overachiever is another way of kind of distracting ourselves from the emotions that we're feeling that are driving that behavior. The emotions of I'm not enough and therefore I have to overcompensate by being a high achiever. Okay, perfectionism is a similar pattern. We have emotions of not being enough, of lack, and so therefore we feel in order to get love, approval, etc., we need to be perfect. Another one is overuse of humor. Okay, so people who feel like they have to be funny all the time, and that can be exhausting to be around those people if you ever experienced that. So as I say, I'd be interested to know what of those things resonates. Feel free to let me know in the chat. So next question is, can connecting to my emotions support recovery from ME, CFS, long COVID related conditions? My experience, my personal experience is yes. I've had times when I've experienced symptoms, sensations in my body, and there was a time when my strategy would be to fall asleep. What I learned is that if I can tune in to my emotions, and there's processes for doing that, then I became aware that there was some locked in emotions. One example I've given in the past is noticing tension in my neck and shoulders and realizing by tuning into my emotions that I was feeling a lot of frustration towards myself. And I realized I needed to forgive myself. And I was experiencing symptoms that were kind of flu-like, and would have expected them to have lasted for about a week at least. And within about 3 hours of doing this exercise, they'd completely shifted. So it is important to connect to our emotions. We also need to be able to take appropriate action. Okay, it might be, for example, if someone's upset me, I need to communicate with them in an assertive way rather than an aggressive way. I've also spoken to many people who've said, and worked with clients who have found that by just getting in touch with their emotions, I was doing a group course recently, we just finished, and by helping people just identify their emotion, feel it, express it appropriately, they said they felt a shift. Sometimes they felt more calm, more energy. Okay, so our emotions are powerful. Okay, so the question is, how do we connect to our emotions? I've actually made a really short video on this. I'm going to upload this onto my Facebook. Sorry, I'm going to upload it onto my YouTube channel. So do follow me to get and hit the notification button, and you'll be notified when I upload it. Should be by tomorrow. Okay. In that video, I talk about 3 things. It's a brief video. One is connecting to our physical body. Okay, and I share a few strategies for doing that. The second is to practice feeling our emotions, and I'll talk more about that in another video. Okay, I'm reading a very interesting book which is all about tuning in to our feelings. And the third thing is to express the emotions in an appropriate way, as I mentioned. So as I say, I will release this video. Let me just show you. Okay, so I'll release this video. Your nervous system knows when you don't feel safe, and I will share some strategies for doing that. So check out that video. That will be on my YouTube channel. And do also check out my playlists. If you follow me, so if you subscribe, hit the notification button, and then go to the playlists, you'll see that I've created a number of playlists. I suggest you check out the playlist on mind-body approaches and the playlist on emotions. That'll give you some food for thought. Okay, so I'd be interested to know what your key takeaway is from this session. If you did find this video helpful, do give me a like, leave a comment, do share it with one person or a group that you're in. If you'd like more tips, I will add the link below this video to my Facebook group, okay, where I release new strategies, tips each week. And if you want help, I am a coach. I offer a 12-week course. You can do that as an online course, or you can do that one-to-one. In January, we're going to be starting a new group course. And I also do coaching either one-to-one or in small groups. So if you'd like more information about that, then get in touch. If you'd like a free chat where we spend half an hour identifying some areas for you to focus on, and if I can share some free resources with you, I will, then you are welcome to one of those half-hour chats. I do 3 of them each week. If you've got any questions, then do get in touch. Thanks for watching. Keep going. You've got this. Wishing you great health. Bye for now.